I'm very honored that we can talk to somebody who knows more about this kind of stuff than pretty much anybody in the country. Senator Marco Rubio has been serving his constituents in Florida since 2011. He served as Speaker of the Florida House from 2006 to 2008, and he has been sounding the warning alarms about the Chinese Communist Party for a long time. Senator Rubio, welcome back to the Mike Gallagher Show. How have you been, sir?
I've been well. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me back on.
Thank you. You tweeted a few moments ago that it was a mistake to not shoot down this Chinese spy balloon when it was over a sparsely populated area. This is not some hot air balloon. It has a large payload of sensors, roughly the size of 2 city buses, and the ability to maneuver independently. Senator, I know we've been talking about shooting it down, but would it make, and forgive me, I'm the layperson here and you're the expert, but why wouldn't we retrieve it? Why wouldn't we capture it and analyze it?
Well, I mean, that would be the point, and that would be the goal. Now, obviously, this thing is dragging sensors on it, which are not small. I mean, these are about the size of a bus,
right?
A couple of them usually, and you see that in the pictures, and they so that would fall to the ground and probably shatter into a million pieces. But there would be something to recover. There's no doubt about it. This is not complicated technology. I mean, that's the one part of it, but it's ingenious in the sense that they can argue, well, that's just a balloon. We put it up in the atmosphere. It's there to monitor. I mean, it seems so silly. It doesn't seem 21st century that they think they can get away with it with some level of deniability, including, well, we didn't mean for it to go over there, but it's a balloon. You know how balloons are. That's actually not accurate. These things are maneuverable to a certain degree. I mean, they're not as precise as a UAV, a drone or an airplane, but they are maneuverable. They can generally know where they're going to go. And I mean, this thing wasn't going over tourist destinations. It went over the Northwest. It went over Montana, where we have ICBM fields. It worked its way across. So it has maneuverability, and it's not the first time, by the way. I mean, we've seen these before. I just think yesterday the acknowledgement of it is because they knew people were going to be seeing it, and there were going to be reports about it, and you couldn't hide it. And I think it is disappointing that they chose not to bring it down when it was over sparsely populated areas where they could have not just retrieved it, but sent a pretty strong message. And it's not coincidental that this is happening right before, I think he's just canceled it, but right before Blinken, the Secretary of State, was supposed to visit in Beijing.
Yep.
They do these sorts of things to humiliate the other side and project strength and send a message. And so I don't think this was coincidental. I think it was certainly tied to that.
And the flip side of that, Senator, is that we project weakness. Then they put us in a position because. And yes, you're right. Blinken has canceled the scheduled trip to China. That we can confirm that. But here's the problem. I mean, and I have to ask you directly. It's a two-part question. Going forward, what should we do about this balloon? But more importantly, what will we do?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do about it, I mean, they're going to go through all the diplomatic stuff and, send the complaint and so forth. But I think we need to be pretty abundantly clear, and that is if these things are flying over our airspace and there's an opportunity to bring them down, we're going to do it. Now, obviously, we're not going to do it in a way that's going to fall on a major city and kill anyone and things of that nature. And it can be a little unpredictable. So it's not as easy as just going up there and knocking this thing down. I mean, you want to make sure that when it comes down, it doesn't come down on some city and kill a bunch of people or kill anybody. By the same token, I think we have to make that pretty clear. But I think the most important thing we can do, look, there's those sensors and those things that they're gathering, but they can also get that information from satellites. They can get that information from all of the Huawei equipment and routers that are still installed across the United States. I mean, there's a million ways they can gather this information that they want, and they are doing it. Their espionage levels have grown. As much as anything else, this is just one more method that they use to collect intelligence on us, and so we have to be cognizant of it and protect ourselves against it. By the same token, we need to wake up. The most important thing we need to do now is wake up, and I think finally, for those who are still resistant to this notion, understand that China is a geopolitical competitor and adversary, the first we've had since the end of the Cold War. And they're actually, a bigger and stronger adversary than the Soviet Union, which was a military superpower, but it was not an industrial, technological power, right. Economic power. The rest of the century will be defined by this relationship between the U.S. and China and this strategic competition. And we need to readjust everything we do in our country to that reality.
And you've been saying this for some time. I mean, you introduced bipartisan legislation to ban TikTok from operating in the United States. And it just feels like your pleas are falling on deaf ears. Obviously, TikTok is enormously popular. Can you explain why TikTok is so dangerous for the citizenry of the United States?
Well, I start by explaining why it's not. Okay, the danger here is not what I would tell you are interesting videos that people put up there. It's a platform that certainly is very successful because it uses artificial intelligence and knows exactly what you like. Every time you're on it, it learns more and more about you. But how is it learning about you? Well, one of the ways it's learning about you is it's collecting all of the data, and not just all the data on your app, all the data on your phone that it is collecting even without your permission. Your photos, your text, your location, your friends, everything. It knows more about you than you know about yourself, and it can use it to predict what it is you like to look at and what kinds of videos you're likely to stay on versus others. And every time you use it, it learns more and more about you to the point where it is ahead of you. It's artificial intelligence. Now, why is that a danger? It's not a danger because some 16-year-old's data. It's because it's the data of 50, 60 million Americans and everyone they interact with,
right,
to the extent it touches your device. And what does that allow them to do? Well, a lot of things. First, just on a commercial front, imagine the advantage that kind of information on Americans would be to Chinese companies looking to market here, to destroy an American company with American jobs and replace it with a Chinese company that does it better. And people will say, well, how does that Chinese company sell so well? Because they know more about Americans than American companies know, or Americans know themselves.
Exactly.
What about in a moment of conflict? Okay. What about in a moment of conflict where they decide, okay, all of the videos that talk good about why China has a right to take Taiwan, those are the videos that TikTok is going to show. All of the videos that talk bad about China, we're not going to let those trend on it. And so you can influence society. Right. But the third is the unknown vulnerability of this data, the unknown vulnerability that maybe I'm not on TikTok, but someone I'm close to is. And somehow through that back door, they've been able to gather not just information on them, but information on me. And so which creates a backdoor for them in a moment of conflict to deny us all kinds of things.
Right.
Whether from shutting down the electric grid, all the way to disrupting the basics of life, that to the point where Americans will be inconvenienced and decide, it's not worth doing anything against China. This is the price. We're already facing that.
So forgive me for my cynicism, but TikTok is a great example of how we're just pragmatically in bed with China. So with this kind of complicated relationship that the United States has with China, how do we proceed? I mean, I noticed you use the words, and you're diplomatic. They are an adversary. They're a competitor. They're not our enemy, or are they? I mean, how do we characterize China on the world stage? What should President Biden do in response to this? I mean, how do we unwind this very, very cozy relationship, frankly, that we have with China?
Yeah, well, adversary is it's like a junior enemy, right? I mean, an enemy, I always view the word enemy as someone that you're involved in open, hostile warfare type, conflict. Like ISIS is an enemy of the United States. With China, we hope there'll ever be a war between the U.S. and China because it'll be bad for the world. We don't want that to happen, but they are most certainly an adversary in the sense of they seek to do us harm to their benefit. And so that makes them an adversary at this point. Now, let me go back for a moment and say, how do we do? I think the first step is it's not just about political leaders. I think this is writ large. Here's an example, right? It used to be this, and that is, you're absolutely right. We need more jobs in America. We shouldn't depend on China, except, I don't want to pay a lot more for my iPhone. And if we force the factories to leave China for the iPhone, it's going to cost twice as much. Well, look, but I want to take on China, but not at the expense of paying more for an iPhone or any other product that's made over there. Now it's happening with TikTok. Everybody's like, of course we got to be tough on China, but don't ban TikTok because that's going too far. Right. So there has to come a point here where people have to say, look, I get it. It's gonna be inconvenient. It's gonna be too bad that I can't go on this platform. Wait, maybe someone else will come on. I mean, TikTok in America is because they bought Musical.ly, which was not a Chinese company. They bought a company, took it over, and turned it into this. So I think that it really begins before the political leaders. That actually is about society and people having to accept that, yes, creating distance from China to protect America may lead to some things in your life that make life not as cheap in some cases or fun in some cases as it currently is. But what's more important here?
Right.
What's more important here? The ability to post and watch really cool videos that you like, or the future of this country for the next 20, 30, 50 years, and the world, where China becomes the dominant power at America's expense. And that's the point we're at right now. And that these are the kinds of choices. We can't have them both here. And so if you do that at the societal and public level, then I think leaders will follow. I think a lot of these leaders, frankly, I mean, they're balancing a lot of different things. I mean, in the case of Biden, part of it, and not all of it, is you got people in that administration that think the most important thing we need to do with China is a climate deal.
I know. Well, we have a transportation secretary who says that every transportation decision made has to be made with climate change in mind. I mean, it's stunning. You hear this stuff and you think you can't believe it.
Well, where do they make these batteries and the basic materials that are needed for those batteries, the lithium and otherwise? That's sourced. China dominates that marketplace.
That's right.
So look at solar panels. I mean, we basically were the innovators of that, and they've now taken that over, and so we're going to be more dependent on the technology that the Chinese have come to control. So, that's what I mean by, I mean, they want to go to Davos and they want to go to some forum somewhere and hold hands with the Chinese and say, we've solved climate change. Meanwhile, the Chinese are funding more coal-fired plants than every other country in the world combined right now. You mentioned Davos and these climate change summits and all that, and I'm sorry, I can never shake the image of all of them flying over on their private jets, their big carbon footprint creating private jets. It just is astounding to me. And the John Kerry's explanation that one day, well, I have to get around. It's the way I travel. Are you kidding me? Guess what? American Airlines goes everywhere. Delta, you'll get there on Delta. Senator Marco Rubio, our guest, we're chatting about this weather balloon, or this spy balloon. I keep saying weather. Let's hope it's the wake-up call we need. Let's speak for a moment before we have to say goodbye. Let's talk about these classified documents. You've demanded some transparency from our top intelligence officials. Now looks like we got the FBI swooping down on Mike Pence's house. I wonder if they're going to go to Hawaii. Nice little vacation for some of these FBI agents and check out President Obama's house in Maui. I mean, are you getting cooperation from these intelligence officials over this classified documents mess? No, not yet. And hopefully that's going to change. And by the way, on the Pence thing, what was most amazing to me was that, they won't tell Congress anything, but somehow CNN had a crew at 5 a.m. outside Pence's home ready for the FBI to show up. So
Funny how that works. Funny how that works. Uh-huh.
So here's the fundamental problem, right? And so Justice Department goes in, they seize all of these documents, they start reviewing everything, okay? When they see something that they think might be classified, they send it to the intelligence agencies and say, hey, can you confirm that this is classified or not? Okay. What we want to know is, it's not our job to oversee whatever investigation they're carrying out from a criminal justice perspective. We need to know we have access to all these documents. We just don't know which ones they are. Which materials were the ones that were stored, stored and or taken inappropriately? Because it is our job to oversee the intelligence community. And the intelligence community's role right now is to assess whether those materials being exposed the way they were created a national security problem. And if so, what can we do to mitigate it? For example, those things sitting in someone's garage, like Joe Biden's, if exposed, would it have exposed some method of collection? Would it have exposed some sources, like people? Because those people are in danger. We need to know what the danger is and what we're doing about it. How can we possibly conduct oversight over the intelligence agency's assessment of danger and mitigation if we don't know what we're talking about?
Right.
And so we just can't do our job without it. So they're hiding behind this DOJ thing, which is absurd. That's an untenable position, and it's here. And by the way, there is bipartisan support for the proposition that I've just laid out.
Yeah. So
I think at some point here, we're going to need some cooperation, or things are going to start to happen. Because, for example, the intelligence community, their ability to function, it depends on two things: money that Congress appropriates every year, but also authorization. Which it's not just that you give them the money; you got to authorize them to spend it, and we are the authorizers. So I haven't transitioned to the threat level yet, but I certainly am aware of what our leverage points are as overseers, and we'll use them if necessary to do our job. And so we're in the process. I'm hoping we can get a resolution that's good and right. I believe we will eventually because they're in an untenable position. But so far, the answer is that has not happened. CNN seems to know more about it than the people in government charged with overseeing these agencies.
Senator Marco Rubio, I don't say this often to our guests. I get to interview a lot of people, but frankly, I have such a deep, tremendous respect for you and an admiration. You're smart, you're passionate, you're focused. And as a Floridian, may I just say, we're real lucky to have you in the U.S. Senate. Keep fighting the good fight, sir. And I know our audience appreciates you joining us here on the Mike Gallagher Show. All the best, sir.
Thank you so much.